My paper is an exploration of the value of exegesis as it is taught and practiced at theological faculties in Germany. First, by taking a cursory look at how German universities understand the word exegesis and how this understanding developed historically. Second, by exploring the current situation of the effects exegesis has on working with biblical texts. Lastly, I will focus on the challenges and problems that come with this approach. Exegesis begins with translating. The first step of studying theology at German universities is to learn languages. Every student of theology faces one of the biggest challenges in their first semester: learning ancient Hebrew, ancient Greek, and Latin. Theologians learn ancient Greek syntax and Hebrew verb forms. We learn the meaning of words and how difficult it is to find an appropriate translation. Often, there is not one right way to translate, and changing one word means changing the whole sentence. The process of translating shows biblical texts are ambiguous. German Protestantism and translating biblical texts into a commonly understood language belong together right from the start. Undeniably, Martin Luther is famous for his criticism towards the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope, and for being a powerful reformer. However, his name is closely connected with his translation of the Bible. To the present day, a revised, modern version of Luther's translation is one of the most popular Bible translations in Germany. Luther demanded to refocus on central points of doctrine, which can be summarized in the so-called Four Soli. Humankind receives and knows about God's benevolence only sola fide, sola gratia, solus Christus, and sola scriptura. The latter concludes one of the main principles of Lutheran doctrine that shaped and continues to shape German Protestantism to the day. Sola scriptura, only scripture, is the source of faith. Therefore, the only logical consequence is great interest in researching this source of faith. It is not surprising that the knowledge of the text that comes with translating them led to further research. Translating a text means to read it very closely and to be familiar with its expressions and meanings. I do not intend to write a history of historical critical exegesis. Still, it is not surprising that in the time of the Enlightenment and Pietism, those people, pastors and interpreters working with the texts daily, started to notice tensions and ask questions. They searched for answers, came up with theories about the development of biblical texts and the canon. Scholars researched the form and function of biblical texts, historical events, and their influence on Israelite theology. They searched explanations for miracles and used reason as a measure for biblical stories. Today, academic theology is unthinkable without historical critical exegesis. Studying theology at a Protestant faculty in Germany implies learning the methods of historical critical exegesis. It means asking for the original meaning in its historical context without considering its impact history or dogmatic relevance. The first step of working with a text is to translate it. It is a basic insight of historical critical exegesis that translating the text alone is never sufficient. Instead, the context, the discourses and traditions relevant at its time of formation, its literary shape and social setting contribute to the meaning of text and need to be considered and acted in translation. Exegesis is the way to translate text and context. Academic theology and exegesis always stand in a dialogue with other disciplines. Ancient philology, history, science of religion, and archaeology are partners in the academic dialogue. Their research results sharpen and deepen the picture we can draw from the context of biblical texts. The academic discourse sets exegetes the task to express their results in a way that is transparent and comprehensible to scholars in other areas. Hence, exegesis developed a professional jargon and a set of questions to ask and methods for that purpose. Scholars ask about the formation of a text with literary criticism and redaction criticism. Understanding the complex redactional processes provides insights into the discourses that shape the texts. In this regard, sapiential texts of the Hebrew Bible can be understood as a literary discussion, for example, about the connection between deeds and consequences. Exegesis adopted questions that originated in literary studies. Form criticism asks for the genre of text and beyond that for their Sitz im Leben. Even though it cannot be determined in every case, these questions can help to range a text in history. Also, the focus on literary motives and theological traditions, their development, and parallels in ancient Near Eastern religions reveal both theological accent unique to the Hebrew Bible and their eminence in this ancient world. Working with a described set of methods often shows the strangeness of biblical texts. Even though they are familiar due to their use in sermons, prayers, and religious services, translating their context reveals that they are rooted in a completely different political and social context and do not speak to us directly. Close readings help discover tensions within the canon, within biblical books, and between the text and traditional doctrines. This strangeness saves us from premature, thoughtless, and incorrect interpretations. Rather, there are ambiguities to be discovered and to be tolerated. By asking for the social background of a text and its original setting, exegesis teaches theologians to read and understand the text instead of assuming what it wants to say. In other words, exegesis forces theologians to reflect their hermeneutics. Taking the original meaning of a biblical text seriously questions presuppositions and reveals if readers tend to see a reflection of their own world and worldview in a text that is not a mirror, but a window to ancient Israel and Judea. Keeping scholarly standards and being in dialogue with other areas binds exegesis to a mode of practice that reflects, wherever possible, its presuppositions. Interpretations are not arbitrary, but are accountable based on the exegetical methods. It goes without saying that not only can two exegetes come to different opinions, interpretations diverge over time. What was consensus, for example, in the Pentateuch exegesis a few decades ago, is highly questionable today. An exegete's focus of interest will always influence the questions they ask, and that might change the outcome. Modern exegesis knows that it is never free from preconditions. Differences of scholarly opinions persist despite consistent use of methods. They do not discredit the methods. In fact, different results of methodical interpretations underline the ambiguities within the object of interpretation. The usage of accountable methods ensures that the text is not read contrary to its meaning. Moreover, this previously mentioned tolerance for ambiguities can be applied to other areas in a complex, diverse society. If theologians learn fundamental attitudes through their exegetical work, they gain competences they will need, whether they work in academia, church, politics, or society. This leads me to my second part of the paper. Theological faculties in Germany are the place of academic education for different professions. After finishing university, students of theology work as pastors in churches, as teachers for religious education in school, or other work fields, such as research positions or in diaconia. As most students are enrolled in the courses of study that lead either to a bachelor or master of education, or to the final examination for the degree Magister Theologiae that is conducted by the territorial churches, my focus will be on these fields of work. After learning and using the professional exegetical jargon, those theologians now face the challenge of retranslating what they learned. In schools, in communities and churches, biblical texts play an important role in everyday life. Every Sunday, pastors give a sermon about a biblical text. According to the lectionary, grieving persons find comfort when they pray the familiar psalms, and teachers read the story of Noah and his ark for 4th grade. Once again, the analysis of the context is crucial. The same people who are used to exegete biblical texts now have to exegete their audience and are supposed to find a language that their addressees understand. What words can they choose, and what metaphors are appropriate? There are two sides to this challenge. First, it consists in a sensitivity for the social backgrounds. Teachers and pastors are academics. In practical theology, scholars have adopted the theory of milieus from social sciences and pointed out that with the social background, the expectations towards church and indirectly towards preaching and teaching change. Therefore, teachers and pastors must be sensitive towards the topics the addressees are interested in, what is relevant for their everyday world, and which manner of expression they prefer. Secondly, there is the theological side to this challenge. The language of scholarship is often describing, should be concise, and is sometimes complicated. When engaging with people outside of academic discourses, theologians often must translate the language of scholarship, which they learned at university and are used to, into the language of faith. Biblical scholarship is not isolated from the church, even though they might speak different languages. Instead, the Protestant Church is built on the foundation of academic theology. Seen from an ecclesiological perspective, the educational differences regarding the biblical texts and their exegesis can cause tensions. Pastors are experts of theology and exegesis. They are professional translators from biblical Hebrew or Greek to scholarly language to the choice of language in their communities. Without a doubt, they take leading roles in their parishes. However, the governing body of a congregation is the parish council that is often constituted of lay people. Therefore, pastors are reliant upon the acceptance of their exegetical competence. Potential for conflict lies in the contradiction of exegetical insights with common beliefs that are rooted in popular devotion. For example, that headlines of the Psalms, like Mismole David above Psalm 23, are a redactional addition to many Psalms, challenges the popular view of David as the peaceful king with a harp and composer of the Psalms. Although this view of David might be widely spread, it does not touch sensitive theological topics, like a Christological reading of prophetic texts, like Isaiah 7 or 11, which is obviously not covered by the original meaning of the text. One could argue that all the knowledge exegesis has gained since the emergence of historical critical research has become way too complex and too particularized to keep track of it. So, how are theologians from other disciplines than exegesis, and even more so those who left the academic sphere, supposed to be up to date? Is there even a chance for interested lay people to learn about exegetical work? There is a twofold answer to these questions. I could make it easy and say they are not supposed to keep track of the latest exegetical debates. Unquestionably, studying the Bible academically, in dialogue with other humanities and with elaborate methods, make exegesis a highly specialized field of research. The required language skills alone exclude many people and can be a hindrance to be part of or just to follow a discussion. Moreover, some discussions are ramified and interwoven with others, so that even experts in this field cannot read every article that is published and know every position. Therefore, is exegesis, with its discussion about mere details, useless to everyone but some scholars in their proverbial ivory tower? This leads me to the more complex answer to these questions. Lay people or theologians who left the academic field often will not have skills or the time to keep up with the development of academic discussions, and they are not required to do so. To discuss Noah and his ark in school it is not strictly necessary to know the latest suggested model for reductional criticism of the Pentateuch. I'm not arguing against learning the modern latest development in biblical scholarship. Rather, essential is the attitude that comes with the knowledge of historical development of biblical texts and their context. Those who were forced to reflect about the hermeneutics and have seen the use of exegesis are unlikely to fall back behind that. This fundamental attitude is cultivated and practiced during academic education. It would be dire reasoning to think this made advanced exegetical research at universities obsolete. On the contrary, detailed studies and close research are still needed. They continue to bring light to the original meanings and context of the biblical texts. By reassessing older theories and changing the focus of questions to new perspectives, they sharpen the overall picture exegesis can draw of the biblical world, especially when traditional historical critical ways of looking at the text are combined with modern reader-centered approaches. Exciting discoveries can be made. Exegesis starts with the translation. Studying biblical texts academically leads exegetes to better translations into their respective language cultures of their work outside universities. At the same time, exegeting a biblical text is way more than translating. Exegesis is about being able to speak responsibly about those texts that are the foundation of Christian faith. In Germany, many people are alienated from religious traditions, but they still search for their spiritual and religious home. At the same time, fundamentalist tendencies of all kinds offer easy answers to highly complex situations. In this situation, Protestantism and theology cannot afford to give up on the competence to speak about its foundation in a scholarly, responsible way. Exactly this competence is what studying the Bible academically provides. Thank you for your attention.